So let's get started. After telling you that you'd be hearing me lecture and no more in-class stuff for a few weeks, I actually decided that today would be an exception. I will lecture probably for about half an hour, but then I have a PHP program I want you to write for the last 45 minutes. And the reason is I think the book does a good job of going over the basics of PHP, and you don't need to hear me regurgitate it. You did participation activities so you would understand kind of what's going on with PHP. So I want to spend a bit of time kind of emphasizing how PHP is a bit different from C and C++ and how it's been designed to make it easier from a programmer's perspective. And almost all scripting languages are going to resemble PHP in the features it offers in terms of providing programmer efficiency. I also wanted to point out that I have kind of, so in the table it says lecture slides and assigned readings and participation activities. I've kind of commandeered those columns in different ways. So now the lecture video is appearing here. It used to appear over here. And now you can see each day there's pre and in-class activities. And the book doesn't really have challenge activities as much anymore. So you are going to start doing quizzes again. So for today, you're back to doing quizzes on Canvas. So I just wanted to point that out. They're due in 2 days, just like they normally have been. So you'll probably be doing quizzes for a while, again, as your after-class activity. Also, just want to point out that the next homework assignment is due essentially tomorrow night. If you want to work through the night, it's technically due Saturday morning at 6 a.m. So, questions, especially about the homework. I know there's a question on Piazza that I saw but didn't get a chance to respond to. I'll respond to that one after class. Okay. Whoop. Benjamin. Pardon, what? Okay, no problem. You can, okay. So, let's see. Okay. So what I kind of wanted to emphasize with PHP is those things that make it easier to use. There's also one thing from last time that I did not mention, which is that when you have these PHP code islands, the variables don't go out of scope when the island ends. You can use them in a succeeding island. So you might have a PHP thing where you have written something like $x equals 10, and then later you might have another one and you might say echo $x, and this will work because x remains in scope for the length of the file. Okay, so that can be handy because sometimes you want to be able to put HTML between your code islands. Okay, so first thing you should be noticing as to how PHP is different from C and C++ is that the variables don't have to be declared and they are dynamically typed. So if I can say $x equals 10, and PHP will treat it as an integer variable, but if I later say $x equals Brad, now PHP will treat it as a string variable. So the type of a variable is whatever value, the type of the value it currently stores. We call that dynamic typing. If you haven't heard that term before, that's what it is called. Whereas languages like C, C++, Java, they're statically typed, meaning that at compile time, you declare the type of the variable, and that type is invariant throughout the entire program. At runtime, the only type of value that variable can store is the type you declared it with prior to running it. Whereas in a scripting language, the types of the variables, or the variables are dynamically typed, so they're very flexible. They can take on different types depending on what value has been assigned. Okay, second thing, because strings get manipulated a lot with scripting languages, most scripting languages support something called interpolation. So interpolation is where you might see something like $, name equals smiley, and then you might see something like dog equals my name equals $name. And what will get stored in $dog is what? Someone remember from the reading? What gets stored is my name equals smiley. So it replaces variable names with their values, and that is called interpolation. So what you see here, this is called interpolation. Okay, JavaScript doesn't support it, but many scripting languages like PHP and Perl do, yes. Yes, so if you really want that $sign to appear there, and so what you really want is my name equals $name, you would put a backslash, and that would say, I literally want a $sign. Or the other thing you can do is single quotes do not do interpolation, so you could also say my name equals $name. And then you don't have to escape it because single quotes don't do interpolation. Only double quotes do interpolation. So that's something also to remember. So single quotes, no interpolation. Double quotes do interpolation. So that can be pretty handy. And sometimes, so normally there is white space after the variable name. But if there isn't, like let's say you want it to say $dog equals this ball is $name, like that. Now it's less clear what is part of name, whether the apostrophe there is part of name, so you can always put curly braces, and that will tell it where the name ends, where the variable name ends. Okay, so that way you don't have to have white space between the value that gets interpolated and the next character. Okay, so interpolation, yes? So it doesn't automatically end the variable name before the apostrophe? It might in this case because an apostrophe is not a valid character for a variable name, but there could be a case where you have a valid character for a name following it that you want directly. So here I don't think you would need it. I'd have to test it, but I certainly have had cases where directly after it I want like a 3 or a 5 or something, and those definitely could be part of the variable name. Other questions about that? Okay. Next thing is that all scripting languages pretty much have two types of built-in data types. And those are, one of them will be either a list or array. In PHP, it is an indexed array. So in PHP, it is a numerically indexed array. And the other built-in data structure will be a dictionary, which is really a hash table. And even in languages that purport to support it as a list like Python, Python actually implements this list using arrays. So generally the underlying implementation is an array, whether they tell you that or not. And part of that built-in implementation is that it's very easy to specify your values for an array. So for example, in PHP, I could say colors equals orange, and all I'm doing is using square brackets here, blue, violet, and this will give me an indexed, numerically indexed, that's not a, this is a square bracket, an indexed array that I can get to through 0, 1, 2. So $colors of 0 would give me orange. If I wanted a key value pairs, so let's say that I had dogs and their colors, I might have lab black. Yes, I know labs don't have to be all black, but ours always were. I'll say cocker. I think cockers are often tan. Pit bull. So ours has a beautiful white and brown, so I'll just say white. So that would create the second type. This would create a dictionary, and the keys are lab, cocker, and pit bull, and the values are black, tan, and white. And if I can give the key in square brackets, and that will give me the value. So I use square brackets for either numerically indexed arrays or for hash tables. And this isn't just PHP, this is JavaScript, this is Python, this is Perl. All the scripting languages have these built-in data types. So you're not including them from the STL or the Java generics. They are built into the language. You have built-in functions for manipulating them. They're in the textbook. I'm not going to regurgitate them. But that's another feature that makes it a lot easier to deal with scripting languages. What is not built in are trees. If you want some kind of balanced binary search tree, you have to implement it yourself or get it out of a library. The reason it seems is that for the most part, when you need to store things, you don't need them in sorted order. So you would use a hash table because hash tables have better performance. Their cost for insert, find, and delete is order 1. For balanced trees, it's order log n. So it seems most scripting languages have opted to forgo built-in trees. If you want something in sorted order, then scripting languages make it very easy because they have built-in sort functions. Section 12.3 or 12.4 talked about the different sort functions, or it may have been 12.5. I know one of them talked about the different sort functions for arrays. And in fact, you have a sort function called asort, which sorts on values. So that works, and it's also ascending sort. You would have rsort, okay, ascending, reverse sort on value, so descending. You have key sort, ksort, and I believe krsort. So these work with dictionaries. So all scripting languages pretty much give you these built-in sort functions that allow you to quickly sort either a dictionary or array or list into ascending or descending form, so you really don't need a balanced binary search tree in most cases. Okay, so I find that I definitely use these sort functions a lot more frequently in scripting languages than I do in compiled languages. Yes, Bentley. I thought you could. Maybe I'm wrong. Here, we can always try it. So let's give it a quick try. You'd be surprised. Here we go. So let's try doing an A sort on $A, and then we'll print R. Make sure, shoot, it's already in order. Let's do R sort on it. So if you haven't seen print R, what it does is it prints out the contents of an array. So if this were to work, the value should come out as 4320. It did. So it works. Actually, you shouldn't be so quick to say that you might not want to sort on the last item. Dr. Planck sometimes does things like accumulate. Let's say, actually, here's an easy one. Let's say that you were doing a word count, okay? So a frequency count of all words in a file. And then at the end, you want to print out the words in either ascending or decreasing order by frequency. So you'd probably use a dictionary to keep track of the words, right? Because each time you get a word, you add one to its count. Yeah. But now when you print it out, you need to sort by frequency. So that actually would be a good example of where you need to sort by value. So it's actually not as uncommon as you might expect. Okay. So that is that. Then, along with this built-in support, you get a nice way of iterating through arrays or iterating through dictionaries. And you should get used to it. So in PHP, it's called for each, and the for and the each are not separated. And I always separate them, and I always get a syntax error, and it always pisses me off. But you don't separate the for each. And the first thing is the name of the array, and the second thing is your iteration variable. So it goes through and assigns each value in the array to that value one. So if I was doing back here, I had colors, so I could have said, so you see colors is orange, blue, and violet. So what I could have said is for each $colors as, say, $color. And now I could print it out, say print $color dot \n. If you're wondering why I'm using a dot, that's concatenation. Print can only print one argument. That's why you should always use echo. Except that I'm so used to using print that it just, that's what I use. But echo allows you to print multiple arguments separated by commas. Print only allows you to print one argument, so you're always doing string concatenation. You should use echo, it's more convenient, but of course, the first thing on your mind is print. Oh, pardon? Nope, you don't need parentheses for the print statement. You don't. I think you're allowed to use them, but it's unnecessary. Same thing for echo. You don't need to use parentheses for it. Yep, don't need to do it for print either. Okay, and you can also iterate through dictionaries, which is really cool. So for each, and now you just put this arrow equal greater than, and this will put each key into the key and each value into the value. Typically you would sort it, before you did this because typically you want to move through it in forward or reverse order. And also, sort is done in place. Just be careful about that. Once you sort something, it's done in place, which could have an issue for a dictionary. I've never looked into the performance implications of sorting a hash table, but it seems like that would totally destroy the randomness of it. So I'm not sure what happens to its performance. Basically, I think you use a hash table to accumulate some stuff, then you sort it, then you never use it again, other than to iterate through it, probably. Okay. Next thing, you almost never read from C in or C out with PHP or with JavaScript because they weren't meant to be used with the console. It's not impossible to read from C in and C out, it's just you typically don't do so. So for PHP, the console is really the form data sent by the browser. So see, that's important enough to write. Okay, so for PHP, PHP doesn't normally take its input from the, doesn't normally take input from the console, i.e. standard in. Okay, instead, its input, of course I can't do that, input normally comes from the browser in the form, well, as form data. Okay, we haven't yet talked about how you get a hold of that data, but we will. Also, you can open and close files, and you do that a fair amount, especially when PHP was first invented. There was this form called XML. So HTML came first, it's a markup language. Then people liked markup languages so much, they said, why should we be limited? Why should we be good, Brad? Why should we be limited to doing markup for HTML only? So they developed a more general markup language called XML, which allowed you to create your own tags. And with XML, PHP was often reading these files and doing various things with them. So, in fact, PHP has some very nice commands for getting file contents and, in fact, sucking in the entire file. So, instead of it does have things like fopen, fwrite, fclose, but oftentimes you can accomplish all of that by just saying something like file underscore get underscore contents in the file name that opens the file, reads the entire file into a string, and closes the file. Really handy. Now, one thing, if your file is 500 megabytes, that's a bad idea. But most of the time, you're not working with 500 megabyte files. You're normally working with files that are only a few thousand bytes. So file underscore get underscore contents is fantastic for getting the entire file into your program in one foul swoop. Okay, and if you want to write out a file in one foul swoop, they got it for you too. File put contents. You give it a file name and either a string or an array of lines, and it will open the file, create it if it doesn't exist, write out the contents of the string or the array to the file, and close it for you. It is wonderful. Okay, I use them all the time. Okay, so feel free to use fopen, where you can open it in whatever mode you want, and you can do fclose, and you can then print to the, you can use fgetS to get stuff, and you can use, I think fputs, there we go, no, somewhere there's fputs, fprintf and fputs, to put things to files. I just find that so boring. okay? Because get contents and put contents works so much easier. I remember I used PHP for at least a year before a student walked in and showed it to me. It was one of my grad students. It was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. So, just in case you didn't put it in your notes, file get contents, file put contents. Really great for dealing with files. And we are not really going to deal with XML parsers, but it is the case that, actually we'll probably get to it maybe at some point, but I'll just, in passing right now, note that PHP supports 3 different built-in parsing algorithms that will take a file structured as an XML file, suck it in, and parse it into a parse tree, and then allow you to deal with the XML file through one of 3 different techniques. Not going to go over that today because that's more when we get to the database part, and I may not go over it at all. Okay. I think a final thing, and then I'm going to turn you loose on what I want you to do today. Print and echo. See printf and sprintf. Kind of get them out of your heads, because printf and sprintf, sprintf, yes, they can do some nice formatting, I guess especially when you want to do things like $signs and the like. But for the most part, you use CSS and HTML markup tags to format your output in a browser. So, for example, putting a end line, a new line character at the end of your output isn't going to do anything for you in the browser. Okay, so just to prove this, watch what happens. I'm going to write a very quick program. Need to secure. Okay, I'll call it newline.php. So I'm going to create PHP. I'm going to echo out, hi Brad, put a new line there. Now I'm going to echo out, bye Brad, and I'm going to put a new line. Okay, I'm going to run it at the, we good? 2 lines. Going to echo that out. Oh, doesn't that look nice? Let's run that in the browser. Whoops, that doesn't look too nice. Okay, because the browser ignores new line characters. Anyone remember or know how you get a new line character with HTML? BR. So that's what I mean by it doesn't do a whole lot of good to be putting nicely formatted output. Okay, so in fact what I have to put here is a BR and a BR here, and now it's going to look nice and ugly when it comes out at the console, right? Not pretty at all, but when I redo it, it looks really nice in the browser. So the only time you really get around to using formatted output is when you have to do something like put numeric data in fields that are like 10 characters wide and you want it right justified or something. But with CSS, you can control that too. If you're putting data into a table, you just create table cells for each of the data and tell it to right align the numeric or the table cell contents, and it'll be right aligned anyhow. You don't have to use printf to do that. Yes?
Why did you put the BR in the quotes instead of like on the line after the echo statement?
Let's see. So you want me to do it this way? Because, well, I could do it that way. That is one way to do it, but what you want me to do is another echo, like that.
I guess my question is why do you need the echo? Why do you need the echo BR instead of just putting the BR tag?
You want me to do this because I'm going to get an error message.
Yeah, it's a great. I think the question was, can you put that tag in the PHP,
Yeah, like that.
or is that uniquely HTML?
Can I put it
Right, like that. That's my question.
like that?
Can you do that? Yes.
No. This will get me an error message. Should. Unexpected less than sign on line 3. If I go in and do line 3, there it is. So it has to appear outside of the code island. So here is where I have it now is okay because it's outside the PHP code island. Okay, so you can put static HTML outside the code island, but inside the code island you have to echo it out. You're still looking at me like I'm not getting this.
I'll look at that after the last time I
Okay, sounds good. Kelsey, can you help me, or am I?
I mean, I think he just was expecting that you'd be able to put the HTML embedded inside the PHP, and because of how
Yep.
PHP is,
But you can't.
I
Nope.
think that's the.
Right, you can't embed it because it thinks that inside of PHP it thinks that the less than sign is a comparison. It doesn't think it's the start of a markup tag. Okay, so with that, so again, quick review. Let's do a quick review. So we had the fact that variables are dynamically typed and don't have to be declared. We have this cute thing with string interpolation in many scripting languages. We have the fact that scripting languages build in supports for lists and for dictionaries, or for arrays and dictionaries. And you have this clever for each. Every scripting language insists on having different syntax, which drives me up the wall. Okay, but every scripting language has their own version of the for each statement with tiny variations so that you always mess it up. It's kind of like knowing Spanish, French, and Italian and having to they all have slightly different spellings on the same word. Okay, so that's really helpful. And then this ability to sort stuff using sort functions, very handy. Okay, so what I want you to do is create a small program, PHP program. So basically I want you to get experience writing a small PHP program, putting it in your web home directory, and then getting it to run. So what I want you to do is create a little word frequency program. I think I called mine word count. And it doesn't have to be prose.txt. I had one called prose.txt. But basically, what I want you to do is write a PHP script that will take a file. You can hard code the file name because you don't yet know how to get it from the browser. And open the file, count the number of occurrences of each word, then write it out as an ordered list using OL. And you should, in this case, I was doing it, I know it's hard to tell, but I sorted it by in alphabetical order. And I probably should have converted everything to lowercase. What happened is uppercase is always before lowercase. So don't worry about that. Just what I want you to do is print it out in sorted order by word and use the OL to generate an ordered list so that you have the words in alphabetical order with their frequency counts. Is that clear? Does anyone have a question about that? Okay, so where you're going to put it is in your web home directory. You all have a web home directory. And in order to run it, notice up here I did not type in web home. At UTK, it assumes when you type in your address that web home is where it's going to start. So PHP was my top level directory in web home, and wordcount.php was the file in web home. Also, make sure that your permissions are at least 0644, and I think they may have to be 0755. I'm not positive. At the very least, they have to be world readable. If they're not world readable, I think it only has to be 644. Nope. It has to be 755. Can anyone tell me why it has to be 755? Very good. You have to execute the script. It's not just that it's readable, it also has to be executable. So make sure your permissions are 0755, giving the world read and execute permission. Okay? So feel free to ask questions, but get to work on that. It's not a long program. It's like 10 lines. Again, you can hard code the name of the file.